Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to Colin's Corner. Today we are going to be doing a general review / my overall thoughts on the first 3 books in the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher. But before we get into the review, we need to go over the answer from the last Comedy with Colin segment, where I asked you guys the joke, why do cows have hooves and not feet? The answer? Because they lack toes. Okay, guys. Without anything further, let's get into this review. So if you're completely new to the Dresden Files, you're probably wondering what it's about. So the first 3 books are called Stormfront, Full Moon, and Grave Peril. And in these books, we are introduced to our main character. His name is Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden, and he is Chicago's first and only private wizard detective. As of the making of this video, I believe there are 17 novels released in the Dresden Files series, and it is a planned 23 or 24 book series. Whoa. Now, there's no need to feel too daunted by this because these are serial novels. They're all self-contained story arcs, and they all have nice, satisfying conclusions thus far that I have read. However, it is highly suggested, in fact recommended, to read them in order because there is a continuously developing larger plot of the story kind of happening in the background of all of these serial novels. More or less, what we're getting with these first 3 Dresden File books is there's some kind of mystery crime plaguing the city of Chicago and its inhabitants, and it has supernatural elements. And they require the knowledge and expertise of a wizard and the police department in conjunction to solve them. Therefore, here comes our main character, Harry Dresden. Just within the first 3 books of this series, we get a pretty good idea of what types of creatures Harry will be encountering over the course of this series. We are introduced to werewolves, vampires, fairies, spirits caught inside a humorous talking skull, demons, angels, and some like Cerberus-esque hellhounds, amongst others. So Butcher doesn't waste a lot of time introducing us to the type of world we are going to be dealing with in this alternate version of Chicago. So Harry is part of something called the White Council, which acts as a sort of self-governing body for the wizards of the world or worlds. And we learn about some other self-governing bodies in these first few books, like, for example, the vampire courts. So there are many different forms of magic being utilized throughout this world. We see uses of potions, spells, curses, possession, shape-shifting, and portals, just to name a few of the ones that have already appeared that I can think of off the top of my head. So let's talk about a few of the characters that have gotten a lot of page time in just these first 3 books, and we'll lead it off with our obvious one, our main character, Harry Dresden. Harry Dresden is a sarcastic womanizer whose mouth gets him into just as much, if not more, trouble than anything else that happens in this series. He is, however, a very funny guy, I think, at least. I know that's kind of objective, but I like his sense of humor. I've found myself chuckling audibly multiple times at some lines of dialogue that he has said in the series, and Harry's a bit of a loner when we get to meet him. He lives in an apartment with his rather large cat named Mister, and he kind of just awaits calls for wizardly work. There's not much of that, though, so Harry pretty much takes whatever he can in terms of getting paid work. One of his main sources of income is due to his relationship with one Karen Murphy, who is the next character that I would like to discuss. Now, Karen is a police officer that works for the Special Investigators Unit in the Chicago Police Department. Karen is a short, stocky, don't mess with me little ball of energy. She's always had to fight for her place and respect in the Chicago Police Department, and she does not take crap from anybody or anything. If there's a case to solve, she's willing to do anything to solve it, including reaching out to the weirdo wizard that none of her colleagues believe is true, and who can't figure out why she keeps Harry around. Karen essentially uses Harry as a supernatural encyclopedia whenever occurrences happen, cases come up that cannot be explained by simple humans. Now, as with any bizarre or difficult to solve police investigation, on top of trying to solve the case, there is inevitably going to be members of the press that have to be dealt with. This leads us directly into the next character that I just want to briefly mention. That's going to be Susan Rodriguez. She's a media reporter for an outlet called The Arcane, and they basically just report on anything supernatural that happens throughout the city. Now, they don't get a lot of publicity, and people kind of think they're just some little, tchotchke little news source that shouldn't be taken seriously, but Susan takes her job very seriously, and she just so happens to be Harry Dresden's love interest. Harry and Susan's relationship begins as a very openly flirty and heavily give and take based relationship. Susan needs some info for a story, and Harry wants to trade something for it, if you know what I mean. But it's been fun to see their relationship between these two characters grow and evolve just over the course of the first 3 books. Now, I just want to briefly touch on the plot of the first 3 books so that you guys can kind of have an idea of what you're going to be walking into if you decide to pick up the Dresden Files. So, book 1 is called Stormfront, and in this first book, Harry gets a call from Karen Murphy to help solve a gruesome double murder that took place in a luxurious hotel suite. The 2 victims died in an extremely bizarre manner. Their hearts literally exploded. And it gets even more interesting when it is discovered that one of the victims happened to be one of the top lieutenants of citywide crime lord Johnny Marconi. With the emergence of a new street drug called Third Eye, which essentially gives people supernatural powers on the rise, Harry ends up having to deal with much more than he originally bargained for. The second book in the series is called Full Moon. In this one, Murphy calls Harry in to solve another homicide, and it just so happens that another henchman of crime lord Johnny Marconi has been murdered. So this guy is getting around. However, at the scene of the crime, there are some bloody dog-like footprints that are discovered, and these prints end up leading Harry on a trail that takes him to a pack of street werewolves called lycanthropes, who essentially become beast-like in their minds, but don't actually change into werewolves. I don't entirely understand it. But somehow, this street gang of werewolves is tied to the crime, the homicide, and Harry and Karen have to fight to find the proof that they need. And the third book is called Grave Peril. Now, as the title suggests, Chicago is in a pretty dire situation in this one. The barrier between the spirit world and the real world has somehow become weakened, and that has allowed for an inordinate amount of tormented ghosts and spirits to wander into the real world and wreak some real havoc. In this third book, we are introduced to maybe my favorite character in the Dresden series so far, named Michael Carpenter. He is what's called Knight of the Cross, and a wielder of the sword called Amarachius. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But a Knight of the Cross is essentially, I think, one of 3 knights who help God fight against some of the darkest forces of evil that may appear in the world. So Michael and Harry need to do some serious ghost hunting in this one, and we even get to meet some of Michael's family in this one, which is really cool. So I love Michael as a character, and I think that Grave Peril is probably my favorite of the first 3 so far, although I like them all around the same amount. Overall, I have really enjoyed my experience with the first 3 books in the Dresden Files. So far, I've just been kind of tossing them in between some of the larger, heavier books that I've been reading, because they aren't too mentally taxing. Jim Butcher does not employ a writing style that requires a ton of mental focus like somebody like Robin Hobb maybe. Like, I can't really read Robin Hobb when I'm extremely tired, but these Dresden books I could pick up and have no problem with. And they are definitely a lighter tone, at least right now. Now, with that being said, I know that, many fans of the Dresden series have said that this series becomes so much more than just these simple, fun little serial crime novels. And that plot that I mentioned in the beginning of the video really begins to deepen and become way more intricate. So I am really excited to see this kind of progress as the books go on in the series. I'm actually reading this one with my mom, so we have something to talk about when it comes to reading. We're taking our time, we're not too rushed to get through it, so we're tossing one in every month and a half. But I definitely just wanted to kind of order my thoughts and get a video out to anybody who might be thinking about picking up the Dresden Files for the first time. That's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching if you're still here. If you've read the Dresden Files books, drop down in the comments and let me know what your favorite book in the series is so far. And if you haven't, let me know if this video helped you decide to make the leap to get into this world. Before we go, we have to do comedy with Colin. Today's joke, guys, is going to be, why don't scientists trust atoms? If you think you know the answer, drop it down in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a like. That way maybe more people will see it. And if you're enjoying the content on the channel so far, please do consider subscribing, as that helps me out a ton. I hope you are all enjoying what you're currently reading. And remember, you're always welcome in Colin's Corner.